Hi everyone, welcome once again to the Adventures Travel Club television show. Betty and I are with you, and we're going to visit the South Island of New Zealand.
Wonderful place.
Isn't it though?
Yeah, it's just really great.
I'll tell you, this is one place where we really enjoyed ourselves. Of course, we enjoy ourselves everywhere that we go.
Well, New
I should
Zealand
say
is
that.
so neat, though. I just love it.
is.
I had a phone call the other day from someone, a young teacher that had a chance to get a job over there, and he had seen one of our shows and wanted our opinion. Go for it.
That's right. So we're going to do that right now.
New Zealand's South Island. From the North Island, only a ferry ride across Cook Strait, named after James Cook, the first European to realise that New Zealand wasn't just one big island. To Picton, nestled deep in the Marlborough Sounds. It used to be a busy whaling and trading port. These days it serves as a stepping-off point for the thousands of tourists who visit the south each year. The hulk of an old sailing ship, the Edwin Fox, built in 1853, raised from the seabed by Picton's enthusiastic restorers. And here's another relic. It's called a tuatara. It's a survivor from the times of Moas and dinosaurs, and now has sanctuary on the islands in the Sounds. Nelson, standing on the tip of the South Island, is renowned for perpetuating the name of the famous admiral, its sunny climate, and for growing the region's specialities, apples, tobacco, and hops. Nelson Cathedral marks the spot where early Christian services were held in a tent. The scenic route to the west coast follows the Buller River. In places along the Buller Gorge, the road has literally been hacked out from the cliff face. A good place to stop for a trip into nostalgia, Shantytown. Like a Western movie set, it's typical of gold mining towns that sprang up from nowhere. Men flocked here from all over the world when news of the strike leaked out. A steam train takes passengers through the bush to see the old Chinese gold workings. Panning for gold was and still is a painstaking business. It helps to have an expert on hand. Once you've learned the tricks of the trade, you're welcome to buy your own pan and head out into the bush in search of your own stream and perhaps the big strike. Mitchell's Gully, a real gold mine, still in working order. The water wheel operates the stamping battery, which crushes the rock into small pieces. Each stamper weighs 25 pounds and drops 60 times a minute. The water and mercury-covered copper plates separate sand from gold. Top the grains into a retort, apply heat, and make your own gold ingot.
42 years since I learned French in school.
It all looks so easy, but remember, it was all pick and shovel work in the old days. During the gold rush year of 1865, the Hokitika River mouth was the landing place for boats which brought in over 15,000 people to New Zealand. 2 years later, the figure had swollen to 37,000. Today, the capital of the goldfields, Hokitika, has reverted to a small, quiet town. Little is left of the houses, hotels, and even an opera house that were here in its heyday. One thing that does remain is the statue of Richard Seddon, first mayor of Hokitika. He became New Zealand's longest-serving premier, which earned him a place outside Parliament in Wellington. Greenstone, or jade, was found in large quantities in the Hokitika region. A much prized possession of the Maori people, it was used for making tools, weapons, and ornaments. The love of greenstone lives on. Today's carvers have quite different visions, but perhaps also inspired by legend or nature. A greenstone tui, or parson bird, whose feathers were also prized by the Maori. Nature's own sculpture, the Punakaiki rocks, also known as pancake rocks, and it's easy to see why. Anyone for maple syrup? In the South Island, you can travel for miles through wild and lonely country without seeing signs of habitation. Crossing from the west to the east coast, the first town you'll encounter is Kaikoura, which used to be one of the largest whaling settlements in the South Island. The Whalebone Arch is one of the many relics of the whale hunting days. Kaikoura has a whole whaling museum which recalls some of the great catches, from launching the boats to extracting oil from blubber in the try-pot. Today's boats have to contend with the same wild Pacific, but are looking for smaller denizens of the deep, the more succulent crayfish. The Maori name Kaikoura literally means meal of crayfish, and was once the name of the whole South Island. Crayfish tails, which bear most of the flesh, are so deliciously succulent that they command very high prices on overseas markets. In fact, they are now one of our big export earners. The fishing's good round these parts. The local cormorants seem to think so too. The Kaikoura Peninsula, which was once an island thousands of years ago, is now home to a thriving colony of seals. Somehow they managed to survive the mass slaughter by Sydney-based pelt hunters early last century. Today, seals and all marine mammals are protected by law, a comforting thought. The South Island is home to about 25% of all New Zealanders, and 300,000 of them live in Christchurch on the Canterbury Plains. The focal point for the city is Cathedral Square. The most impressive of Christchurch's neo-Gothic architecture is the Anglican Cathedral. The square attracts characters, some comic, others with a message, but all with lots to say.
Bringing in the vicious brute of a mad, raving animal!
There's none more popular and provocative than the Wizard.
Any man who writes nonsense.
He must have said something very provocative. Canterbury founding father John Robert Godley looks on. So does Robert Falcon Scott, explorer. Christchurch still hosts explorers on their way to the Antarctic. The Christchurch Town Hall is the city's most striking modern public building. Built in 1972, it has pride of place on the banks of the Avon River. The Bridge of Remembrance over the Avon was built in honour of Christchurch's World War I soldiers. The Avon meanders through the city's green belt. Often called the Garden City, Christchurch has an old-world, almost medieval charm, not often seen in a city only 150 years old. The Botanic Garden's neat lawns, woodland and formal flower beds are encircled by the river. The first oak was planted in 1863, though the main attractions are the rose gardens and the conservatories, offering vivid displays of exotic plants. More English than England, that's what they say about Christchurch. It isn't only the architecture that harks back to the motherland. Traditions are upheld too. Christ's College is the closest thing in New Zealand to an English public school. Bicycles rule the road in Christchurch. The land's flat and there's a network of cycle tracks through the parks and reserves. It wasn't long ago that horses provided the main means of transport. Canterbury Museum houses vividly descriptive recreations of pioneer days. Old-timers still recall the Cobb & Co. coaches. Entering Akaroa is like moving into a time warp. French colonists put down roots here in 1840, only to find that the British had already claimed sovereignty of the South Island. There's still a strong French flavour in the town, though most of the buildings that remain are Victorian style. Akaroa was intended as a whaling base, But as it turned out, the settlers preferred the land to the sea. Sheep and wheat farms checkerboard the Canterbury Plains. Fertile soil and warm, dry winds make the region New Zealand's grain and grass seed belt. Sheep farming has a long tradition in Canterbury and the adjoining Mackenzie country. In the 1850s, shepherds and farm labourers were among the first British migrants, so wool quickly became the major export. Lush green grass turned into hay for the winter allows livestock to live outdoors all year round. Holdings are huge in this part of the country, and the steep terrain requires regular fertilising. Aerial top dressing was pioneered in New Zealand and has turned large tracts of unusable country into pastoral lands. Can Kiwis fly? In New Zealand, aviation is a way of life. It all started right here with the intrepid aviator Richard Pearce, who New Zealanders believe made the first recorded flight in history in a heavier-than-air machine. A wayside monument marks the location. Motat Museum recognises the achievement, flight before the Wright brothers. You could be the only person on the planet in parts of the South Island. The barren scrub and tussock lands are grazed. Sheep in their thousands just disappear into the hills to be rounded up on horseback or even by helicopter a couple of times a year. This awe-inspiring country has some unforgettable scenery. Lake Tekapo, with its quaint and solitary Church of the Good Shepherd, is like an oasis. A tribute to the faithful sheepdog. Without him, farming in the Mackenzie country would not have been possible. For the best views, it's up into the hills any way you can get there. The reward, panoramic vistas of ice-blue Lake Pukaki. Choose 3 horsepower or 4-wheel drive. Mount Cook is New Zealand's highest at 12,000 feet. The surrounding national park is one of the most rugged and beautiful wilderness areas. The Hermitage is typical of the quality tourist hotels situated in the remotest spots to take advantage of South Island's dramatic beauty. Mountain climbers from all over the world are lured to Mount Cook. It's not only the challenge of the summit that inspires them, it's the simple grandeur. Bushwalks, mountain streams, and unique alpine flora. You don't have to be a mountain climber to explore Mount Cook National Park. A quick photo for the record before flying deep into the interior. There are 15 peaks over 9,000 feet high, and glaciers, pinnacles of ice, bottomless chasms, and long stretches of powder snow that attract skiers from all over the world. It used to be a problem getting non-climbers to the head of the Tasman Glacier. Then an engineer called Wigley devised the ski plane. Wheels for the landing strip, retractable skis for the snow. The Tasman Glacier is 18 miles long, the longest in New Zealand. Up here it's all beautiful and irresistible, but further down its icy surface makes it one of the most demanding and thrilling ski slopes in the world. West of the Southern Alps is Westland National Park. Jagged, snow-capped peaks rise steeply from the coast. The heavy rainfall gives birth to 12 large rivers and a mass of waterfalls. Vegetation is dense and luxuriant. The park has twin glaciers, the Fox and the Franz Josef. The Franz Josef is 7 miles long and about 7,000 years old. It stops only 12 miles from the coast and feeds the swift and icy Waiho River. The uneven flow of the glacier and meltdown in the sun, rain and wind creates unusual icy structures, a continuously changing and challenging icescape. The glacier is pushed relentlessly by snowfields high up. It flows about 3 feet or so a day. Temperature and snowfall determines the speed. Dunedin's founders, who sailed from Scotland in 1847, have left the indelible print of their homeland on the city. Larnock's castle is as solid as any building in Scotland. The Scots settled comfortably in countryside that wasn't much different from the Scotland they'd just left. Men of the land of the Thistle would never forget their native Scotland, but would equally show their allegiance to their new home. Men like William Larnock sought to create a city that would last, favouring stone to the timber used elsewhere in the country. All roads lead to the Octagon at the heart of the city. It was 1846 when Charles Kettle staked out the city's 8-sided centre. Dunedin, which incidentally means Edinburgh of the South, takes great pride in its cathedral and churches. The Presbyterian First Church is a magnificent example of Gothic architecture with its soaring spires and ornate stained glass. The pioneer architects brought the styles of Europe with them. They wanted to create a model city and even lavished attention on functional public buildings like the railway station. And the law courts, with its Gothic facade, built in 1902 for only £20,000 sterling. Ulverston, built by the Theomin family, has the largest collection of antiques in the country. Parts of the interior were pre-built in England. Dunedin's early citizens must have been fairly affluent, judging by the treasures they accumulated. Ulverston houses the Cigarette Smoker, a national treasure, painted by the artist Sir William Goldie. Goldie's realistic portraits, held in museums throughout the country, opened the door on the Maori way of life, barely tainted by European influence. Scottish poet Robbie Burns has pride of place in the Octagon, and more than a passing interest in Dunedin. His nephew, Thomas Burns, was an early Dunedin religious leader. Many cities, including San Francisco, claim the world's steepest street, but Dunedin's is straight and narrow. The Clutha River could equally have been lifted right out of Scotland. And Roxburgh takes its name from the ancient ruins on Scotland's Teviot River. For New Zealand, Roxburgh means hydroelectricity. When it was built in 1962, it was our largest dam, over 200 feet high, with a 20-mile lake behind it. Roxburgh also means orchards, irrigated by the Clutha's snow-fed waters, apricots, peaches and delicious nectarines. Back near the coast to unusual limestone hills and the caves of Takiroa. Takiroa means long echo in Maori. The very first inhabitants of New Zealand, the moa hunters, lived here, preying on the huge flightless bird that was finally slaughtered to extinction. The hunters used the caves for shelter and left behind rock drawings in charcoal and red ochre. The giant flightless moa towered over its captors. The kiwi couldn't fly away from danger either, but he managed to survive to become New Zealand's national bird symbol. New Zealand has many indigenous birds. The native wood pigeon or kereru, swamp birds like the pukeko, coastal birds like the heron, and the red-crowned parakeet or kakariki found deep in the forests. What can you say about this bird? What an egg! Actually, it's a moraki boulder. They litter the beach along a stretch of the Otago coastline, fashioned by wind and sea. As are the cathedral caves on Waipati Beach. They're about 150 feet high in places, but you can get in here only at low tide. New Zealand's coastline hides a bounty of shellfish. The delicious toiroa, plump and succulent, is there for the passing gourmet. In season, that is. Seahorses, following in the hoof tracks of harness champions Young Quinn and Cardigan Bay, these standard-bred youngsters show their paces on Invercargill's Oreti Beach. The Crown Range Road to Lake Wanaka is the highest main road in the country and one of the few places your car is not insured. Like Queenstown, Wanaka is a summer and winter playground. In summer, there's swimming, water skiing and trekking into the high hills and all manner of boating. Wanaka is the headquarters for New Zealand's second largest national park, Mount Aspiring National Park, and the quick way to get to the action is by hovercraft. The historic Haast Pass is the linking highway to the west coast. It follows the old Maori Greenstone Trail, which was rediscovered by the gold prospector Charles Cameron in 1863. The pass was named after Julius van Haast, who followed later. The Haast Pass has the highest rainfall in the country, but because it's the lowest alpine pass, it's rarely snowbound. Until 1880, the pass was only the Packhorse Trail. In 1929, roadworks began, but it wasn't until over 30 years later that Wanaka was finally linked to the coast at Haast. Farming folk were freed from decades of isolation, and people were given access to some of the country's most striking scenery. Pick and shovel may have helped form the Haast Pass, but wind and sea alone have worked together on dramatic formations along the coastline. The three thimbles are typical of the west coast's rugged beauty, with native forest reaching right to the sea. Lake Te Anau in Fiordland is the longest lake in New Zealand, the largest in the South Island. The remote region is deeply forested and mountainous, and as the area's name suggests, dissected by narrow fjords. The silence broken only by the occasional floatplane. The unspoiled heartland is best explored from the air. The fjords in Fiordland National Park, New Zealand's largest park, were formed by massive glaciers during the Ice Age. Mountains soar vertically from the water's edge. Much of the area is impenetrable. The quiet inner reaches have been left untouched. Well, almost. Much of the park is in dense, moss-laden beech forest, alive with the shrill cries of native birds. There are walking tracks to suit all levels of fitness. The finest walk in the world, they call it, the 35-mile Milford Track. You can do it the hard way, carrying all your own gear, or go with a guide and have food and accommodation supplied. It starts with a launch ride to the head of Lake Te Anau. Explorer Quintin McKinnon was the first to forge his way across the rugged mountains into Milford in 1888. Only 4 years later, he drowned in the very lake that marks the beginning of the walk, Lake Te Anau. The sort of landscape the track traverses is densely wooded, the lush native ferns and trees fed by the heavy rainfall. Watch out for the cheeky care, or mountain parrot, who, rather like the magpie, will steal anything. The reward for aching muscles and shoulders is the superb views along the way, and finally traversing the McKinnon Pass. Then it's the spectacular Sutherland Falls cascading from a mountain lake. Milford Sound, in its unparalleled beauty, the airstrip dwarfed by surrounding rock faces. After the rigours of the track, you may wish to indulge yourself with a night at the Milford Hotel to take advantage of all the best views of Mitre Peak. A launch trip across Milford Sound to Mitre Peak and the Bowen Falls is an unforgettable experience. Sheer cliffs rise 3,500 feet from the sea. Mitre Peak is the king at over 5,000 feet. Donald Sutherland, the first European to discover Milford Sound, was bewitched by its overwhelming beauty. He never left the place. The rest of us are left with memories of one of the loveliest places on earth.
Well, we certainly hope that you enjoyed that, and something else that you might enjoy if you would like to go with us to Zion National Park, the Grand Canyon, Las Vegas, and Laughlin, Nevada. We have that coming up.
We have that coming up, and that's coming up in June the 21st.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be fun. First time we've done bus, so come along, go with us.
Yeah, that will be great. And we would like to remind you that there's going to be limited seating on that for our reservations. So if you are interested in that, we advise you to give Betty a call right away, and Betty's number is
488-7443.
And that's all the time we have. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.